A side, B side, what side are you on?
Well, gotta do it because now since we're doing it every week, it just doesn't feel right. Hello.
Hello. Welcome back to the A side, B side podcast.
What's going on, Adam?
I'm doing well. It is somehow almost into the second week of December, so it'll be 2023 before we know it, and it seems like it was 2007 just a second ago. So it's gone very quickly.
Going so fast. I got to see a couple of movies this past weekend. I saw on Friday night, Violent Night with David Harbour from Stranger Things. And it was not exactly what I was expecting. I thought it was going to go in a very, very different direction, but I really enjoyed it. My daughter really enjoyed it. And it was just, if you like Stranger Things, if you like David Harbour, like his character in Black Widow, like his humor, then you'll appreciate Violent Night.
It looks like it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Absolutely.
You're not. It's not going to ask a lot of you from an audience. I mean, you're going in with no this is going to be realistic, expectation at all.
Right.
So it can just kind of go anywhere.
Yeah. So that was good. And then on Saturday, I went and saw The Menu. Very different type of a movie. It also was not what I was expecting. I did get a laugh at I'm not the biggest Anya Taylor-Joy person because I kind of feel like her characters, I don't know, they come
are all the same.
Yeah, they all come off as kind of entitled to me. I don't know, I could be, I don't know, but anyway, I did appreciate though that she said she was from Grand Island, Nebraska, which is not far from here at all.
Oh yeah. Nebraska getting a shout out in the big movie.
Yeah, I was like, look at that, Grand Island, which is a smaller place here. So I was like, look at
Do you think they were just looking for a location? They were like, this person probably doesn't have a background with fine dining. Where could they be from? Which is not fair.
Maybe.
It's totally like LA just calling out Grand Island.
Either that or somebody is from I just found out that I guess somebody on Blacklist is from Kearney, Nebraska, which is Grand Island, Kearney are very close by. So I'm wondering if it's maybe something like that. People love to toss in those little things that maybe their friends would notice, or Marvel does it all the time with the art director is the guy, the name of the pizza place, Right. Yeah. So I just thought that was a cute little shout out. So that was really interesting. It's got Joseph, one of the Fine brothers, Ralph Fiennes. Which one is that?
I think Ralph Fiennes. Yeah. Ralph Fiennes.
Joseph is the one on Handmaid's Tale. Yeah. So it's got Ralph Fiennes. There's a couple other big names in it. I'm trying to remember, but Nicholas Hoult, Anya Taylor-Joy, some other names I can't think of. Like I said, it's not a movie for everybody. It is in the horror.
Would you call it? So is it more horror or suspense?
It's more, I would say, on the more horror side than suspense.
Okay, because that's kind of how I was feeling, and I don't really go for the horror. I like spooky, but I don't like.
No, I don't think slashy. You would like this, honestly.
Okay,
I don't think
that's the vibe I got. Yeah, because it has sort of a Most Dangerous Game vibe to it, which is a book that I had to read in grade school. I think I read it in grade school. I had to read it in high school. I read a lot of books in sixth grade that I should not have read in sixth grade.
Yeah, it's definitely one that I don't think you would. I think you would leave and be very upset that you watched it.
Yeah, it's not on my list. So
no,
that probably won't be. So does that? I'm sorry, I'm bogarting your whole.
No, you're fine.
Your whole. What else did you see?
Oh, I saw on Netflix, I saw a pretty cool thing. It was it's called Look Both Ways. So it's Lily Reinhart. She was Betty on Riverdale.
Mm-hmm.
And basically the very beginning of the story is she's her and her best friend kind of hook up right before graduation of college. And then at her graduation party, she takes a pregnancy test. And then the story splits in two ways. what would happen
okay.
if she was pregnant and what would happen if she wasn't pregnant. And they show both of those storylines play out throughout the movie, which I thought
so it's like the thought experiment that everybody has when they make a decision.
Exactly. Like, what if this happened? So what if I was pregnant? How would my life turn out? What if I wasn't pregnant? How would my life turn out? So I enjoyed that. And then Wednesday on Netflix.
Oh yes,
because everybody kept talking about how good it was, and Christina Ricci makes an appearance, which is cool because she's Wednesday. That her iconic blow up role in the Addams Family movies. So
that one I did love. That's definitely more spooky than gory.
Yes,
like it's still
definitely.
but
it has
it's
some
so
gore
Tim Burton,
elements, but
yeah, it has some gore stuff, but it's so Tim Burton, and like I can watch Tim Burton scary movies because it's just there's a different. They seem like more clever.
Yeah, they're. I mean, yeah, they're gory, but it's not just slash in your face gory.
Yeah, and this is a mystery as well, and it's got like it kind of feels like Sabrina the Teenage Witch, but Sabrina the Teenage Witch tried too hard to be scary.
Yeah,
the
kind of lost its cleverness. Real dark, and it wasn't like the first season was good, but the second season, I'm not feeling this anymore.
Yeah, and they do enough with like the whole teenage relationship drama stuff without making it Riverdale, but it's not as clunky as Harry Potter. I've been really impressed. I'm super excited that it's coming back for season 2. I binged it. And now I'm on the last episode, and I'm doing that thing where I don't want it to be over.
Is that going to be your reward when we're finished?
I actually have 2 because Willow started out last week, which is the new Disney Plus series, which picks up 20 years after the movie, which I thought was really, really good so far. And the 3rd episode of that came out today. So I don't know. I've noticed that December seems to be a lot of stuff that I'm watching, and it's perfect because it's too cold to go outside where I live because the air hurts your face. So I've just been binge. So I watched Willow, both episodes of that. I have caught up all the way on Tulsa King. I was talking about that last week, how I've loved that. This week's episode was great as well. And then I watched all of Wednesday, and for some reason, I don't know how it started, but I watched both of the Night at the Museum movies again, which I hadn't seen in forever, but are just like kind of fun. They're the perfect thing to kind of have on the background while you're doing something else. Cause but I forgot how long ago those were. I mean, do you see Rami Malek, who goes on to like win an Oscar for his portrayal of, oh my gosh, the lead singer of Queen. Freddie Mercury. I wanted to say Eddie Vedder so bad, and I knew it wasn't right. And I was like, what the heck? I absolutely vapor locked, and I was like, I cannot speak words. But have him as like, the Egyptian king in that, where he barely shows up in heart. Most of the thing doesn't even talk the whole time. Yeah. Is really fun. And then, caught up on NCIS. And then I watched a movie that will lead me into my side, but I don't remember. I think we start with you this week.
We do start with me. So we can.
All right. So I need to stop my roll.
We can go ahead and jump in. So this week it is episode 119. And I think it's been a couple of weeks. Let me just double check before I say that. But I think it's been a couple of weeks since we've had a female serial killer. So we're going to jump back into the female side of things.
We're all about the gender equity with our serial killers here.
Right. So the goal has always been to find people that are not well known. Now, there have been a couple that we've talked about that you may have heard their name or something like that, but this is a name I had never, ever heard of before. This week, we're talking about Betty Lou Beets. Born Betty Lou Denevant, she was born to Margaret Louise Smithwick and James Garland Denevant on March 12th of 1937. She was born in Roxborough, North Carolina. So Betty Lou had a pretty rough childhood. At 3, she lost her hearing due to measles. And she claims that by age 5, she was being abused sexually by her dad and some other family members. When Betty was a child, the family moved from North Carolina to Hampton, Virginia, where her father got a job as a machinist at the Langley Research Center. Now, if you have ever watched any thing with like government or FBI, you know all about Langley. Langley is a popular name. Her mom actually ended up being institutionalized when she was just 12 years old. So Betty Lou ended up having to take care of her younger brother and sister. By 15, I think Betty was ready to get out of the house. So she marries her first husband. His name is Robert Franklin Branson. She marries Robert Franklin Branson, and things weren't always great between them. So after their first year of marriage, Betty claims that Robert was abusive and they separate. Well, things don't go well for Betty. So she tries to end her own life, and her and Robert reconnect. Robert ends up leaving her again for good in 1969. Then we move to the next year, where Betty gets married again for the second time. This time she finds herself married to a gentleman named Billy York Lane. And again, Betty finds herself in an abusive relationship. So one time during an argument, Billy actually broke Betty's nose, but she wasn't taking that laying down. She retaliated by shooting him. She's charged with attempted murder, but Billy says, hey, look, I threatened her life first. So the charges are dropped. The couple divorces in 1972. The next year, 1973, Betty starts dating a man named Ronnie Threlkeld. Ronnie and Betty get married in 1978. So they date from like 73, and then they get married in 78. The marriage ends in 1979 after Betty attempts to run over Ronnie with her car. Betty, however, does not like to be alone because she gets married again. In 1979, she marries her fourth husband, Doyle Wayne Baker.
And it was also, and it's entirely different time. I mean, women couldn't work as much out of the home. You were restricted in some ways.
I'm just saying, if serial killer and serial like abuser Betty can find a relationship, I have hope. I won't be.
Yeah. I mean, but let's look at the gems that she's ending up with. So.
Well, that's true. That's true. So Betty and Doyle Wayne get married, and then that doesn't last long. In 1982, they're gone. They're done, and she moves on to her fifth husband, Jimmy Don Beets. So again, Doyle Wayne and Betty, they just part ways, or do they? On August 6th of 1983, Jimmy Don Beets ends up missing from their home in Henderson County, in Cedar Creek Lake in Henderson County, Texas. Betty's son returns home and he finds that Jimmy Don had been shot to death twice. So Betty asks her son to help her bury Jimmy Don's body in the yard of their Texas home. So then Betty reports Jimmy Don missing. It's not until 1985 that they say, hey, wait a minute, something's going on. Some of Jimmy Don's heart medication was put into his fishing boat the day after he died, which was, again, August 6th of 1983. Mm-hmm. They put the boat in the lake. It's found August 12th of 1983, washed ashore in Redwood Beach Marina. So people, of course, believe that Jimmy Don has fallen over and he drowned. They spent 3 weeks dragging the lake looking for his body.
Oof.
So we fast forward to 1985. So there was information that was received by the Henderson County Sheriff's Office that led to the arrest of Betty Lou for this murder. So a search warrant is issued. They search Betty's home. Not only do they find the remains of Jimmy Don in a filled-in wishing well, also buried in a garage are the remains of Doyle Wayne Baker, her fourth husband, who just they were like, oh, we're parting ways. We're done.
Yeah, he parted ways with life.
Yes. Both of the men had been shot with a .38 caliber pistol. She's not tried for Doyle's murder because she's charged with Jimmy Doyle's murder, and she's sentenced to death by lethal injection.
So only one of the husbands she gets the rap for.
Mm-hmm. So she receives the death penalty, but because she received the death penalty for Jimmy Don, they never even tried her because at that point, I guess they were like, well, she's already died.
Yeah, I mean, you can't kill somebody who's dead.
Right. So, okay, I did kind of give you an ending that, I should have waited on, but you know how. So she goes to trial for the murder of Jimmy Don Beets. It's for the murder for remuneration, which is financial compensation, and the promise of remuneration. Trial begins January 11th of 1985 in Henderson County. It was the 173rd court district. She pleads not guilty, and she claims that two of her children commit the murders. They actually her two children testify against her, but they do both admit to having some involvement in concealing murders. Because you remember, she asked her son to help her hide the body.
Mm-hmm. Now it's accessory after the fact.
Uh-huh. So
if my years of Law and Order have taught me anything.
She's found guilty on October 11th. The evidence of her abuse was never presented to the court. So there's a separate, because you're found guilty, and then later it's like, okay, what's your penalty? So during a penalty phase, 3 days later, she's sentenced to death. She was Texas Department of Criminal Justice death row inmate number 810. So she's sent to the Texas Department of Corrections on October 14th of 1985, where she was incarcerated at the Mountain View unit. So there's an automatic appeal to the Texas Court of Appeals, and they first overturned the conviction, saying that the insurance and pension benefits were not the same as remuneration or compensation for the death. Mm-hmm. The state requests a rehearing on September 21st of 1988. The court says, nah, ruling's going to stand. So she appeals this verdict for 10 years. For 10 years, she appeals. And
'tis the American way.
It is. And finally, she runs out of appeals, and an execution date is set for November 8th. On November 1st, she receives a stay from the trial court after she filed a state habeas petition. The Court of Criminal Appeals denies this request on January 27th of 1990, which leads to a second execution date of December 6th. A federal petition for a writ of habeas corpus is filed 3 days later before her scheduled execution, and the federal district court granted a stay of execution on December 4th. Now, mind you, her execution date is supposed to be December 6th. So throughout the first half of 1981, there's like more trials and things like that, more hearings, trying to see, can she get off, whatever. Well, it ends up that they're all denied. On May 9th, the court grants relief on one of Betty's claims, but they deny all the others. And I guess I should go back and explain what a writ of habeas corpus is. So,
I mean, for the non-lawyers in the audience, I mean, obviously, if you're someone like me who has a paralegal certification they've never used from Massachusetts and watches the Law and Order a lot, then you obviously know what habeas corpus writ is, clearly.
So in the law, it's kind of like a recourse in law through which a person can report unlawful detention or imprisonment to the court and request that the court order that the person be released because they say that they're being detained unlawfully. So she was basically saying she was being detained unlawfully.
Yeah, I mean, coming from the ancient Latin habeas corpus, meaning, hey, leave my body alone.
Hey, leave my habeas, hey, be stop my corpus. I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Hey, be not touching my corpus.
So, the United States Court of Appeals, they uphold the decision May 18th of 1993. Also, they overturned the one claim that had been granted relief, which means she's just back in trouble all over again.
Do you think, like, when she's put on death row this many times, do like does she get to like write up her last meal every time, or is that something they wait till the end?
I would think they wait till the end. I would think like once they really know, like it's final, because it's not like it's going to take them that long to get it, right?
I mean, if I was on death row, I would be asking for the weirdest stuff that they had to like go find. They'd be like, we couldn't get him that certain cheese,
But
so we have to wait.
I think most places now it has to be things that are in the prison or that they can get locally.
Yeah, I know.
I think
that's not as fun to imagine.
I know.
You and your reality.
So all of her appeal, after all her appeals are denied, this takes us all the way through 1999, and execution date is set finally for February 24th of 2000. So we have gone several years. Okay, several years.
She's kicking this can down the road.
Yeah. So Betty Lou Beets is executed by lethal injection at 6:18 Central Time on February 24th of 2000 in the Huntsville unit. She did not final meal. She did not make a final statement. She was the second woman executed in the state after the reintroduction of the death penalty. At the time of her execution, she was 62 years old. She had 5 children, 9 grandchildren, and 6 great-grandchildren.
Wow.
She was cremated after her death, and her ashes were actually scattered over her mother's grave. Betty Lou's crimes were actually retold by her daughter Shirley Fergala as part of an episode of the TV show Evil Lives Here on September 13th of 2020. And there you go. That is the story of Betty Lou Beets.
And she used a gun, right?
38 caliber.
Which is not normal for a female serial killer. Usually, like the one of the preferred methods, the most common method is poison. So
yeah,
she was just breaking all sorts of barriers.
Yeah. So like I said, that was like one that I was like, a lot of times it may be somebody that's unknown, but you might have heard this or that from them. This is one I have never ever heard of Betty Lou Beets.
No, and in fact, when you say Betty Lou Beets, I just assume that is a new music person that I don't know about.
Beats.
Because I literally would be like, oh yes, I have heard them on the Cloud Sound.
The Cloud Sound.
Where all the hip kids find their music.
The Spit Toffee.
Yes, that's pretty great. Yeah, the Spit Toffee.
Pandoria.
Pandoria. I even forget Pandora exists. But...
Except for like now that Avatar is coming back out and you keep hearing Pandora and you're like, oh yeah, this is good for Pandora because everybody's gonna be saying it again.
I'm probably the saddest person that I forget an Avatar existed. Because I just didn't like it that much. And everybody, I was like Dances with Smurfs. And I was like, okay, cool. But
so you're not going to go see the second one?
No, I've only seen the first one once. And I think I watched it at like, I was hanging out at somebody's house and somebody's like, let's watch Avatar. And I'm like, I am here. I will do that. But yeah, it's just not my jam. I don't know.
All right. So there you go. That's the B-side.
And I love that we always deal with mysteries here. And sometimes life has mysteries too. And we talked about Latin. And I had to learn Latin in 8th grade, and I didn't understand why we had to learn Latin in 8th grade because no one had ever it wasn't a thing at my school that everybody learned Latin in 8th grade. It was like a 2-year thing that they tried. And then I found out, and I figured this out years later, but my 8th grade teacher, because I went to a small private school, so we had one teacher taught the entire grade. He was the one who said we should do Latin. He taught Latin for 2 years to 8th graders, and then he stopped being a teacher and went to the seminary. So the only reason that he taught us Latin is because he was prepping for seminary 2 years ahead of time. It's kind of brilliant.
Pretty genius right there.
Yeah, very genius. Well done, Mr. Reedus. I never got to say he went to seminary in Canada too, so it seemed extra exotic.
Oh wow.
It was Canadian seminary.
Are they nicer than?
But
you know,
I would assume so. I mean, Canadians are always nicer, right? Very polite. So as I almost took over earlier and made the A side first because I was so excited about my segue of what I watched this week, I know last week we talked about Tulsa King with Sylvester Stallone and how much I was enjoying that series. It's still really, really good. And evidently this has prompted a whole like Sly Stallone, revival movie watch time for Adam. And there'd been a film that I had been meaning to get to, but just hadn't watched it yet. And it's called Samaritan. It is on Prime Video, I believe. Yes, Prime Video. And it is a superhero story, but it is unique in a superhero story in that it has absolutely nothing to do with Marvel or DC or even a comic that I could find. It's just a standalone superhero movie. It doesn't connect to a larger, multiverse. Doesn't really set up well for the sequel. I mean, I guess you could, but it's a self-contained superhero story. And I was like, you know what? It's been a really long time. And this is how all superhero movies used to be. It was rare that they'd get a sequel. I mean, your Batmans and your Supermans and your Spider-Mans were the exception. If anybody else tried something, it was a one-off and then pretty much never came back. And maybe if it was super good, it got some really bad knockoff ones. And so I started to think about my top 5 superhero movies that have no connection to the main Marvel or DC universe. So one of the things that I promised myself when we started this podcast is I didn't want to do a top 5 every week because it would be so easy for me to just fall into that trap. So it's been a long time since I did a top 5.
It has been.
And so I'm giving myself the grace. This is my Christmas present to me of having a fun top 5 where I just talk about top 5 movies and not have to delve too deep into them or complain about them, but just say, these are fun. You should go watch them. So one caveat, or I guess 3 caveats. There are 3 movies that I did not put in this top 5. 2, because I have already dedicated entire episodes of the A-side to them in the past. So if you would like a full breakdown of one of my favorite superhero movies, Condor Man, which came out in the early 80s from Disney and involved a comic book writer turning into a superhero. And it is so good. I can still hear like Condor Man, the theme song Condor is Man. In my head right now. It's Condor Man. It's so good. An entire episode has been dedicated to that. We've talked about the Masters of the Universe movie from the 80s as well. There's a whole episode on that and also on some of the toys and the history of He-Man and the Marvel and the Masters of the Universe there. So those 2 are out because I've already talked about them and it wouldn't be fair to rehash that all again. And a third one I have been saving for a whole episode in and of itself, and I'm going to continue to save it because I really want to talk about it. And I just haven't had the time to spend a full episode really delving into it. And I will not release that one at this time, but it is not in my top 5. And I don't think anyone would guess that it is that it would be in this top 5 either. It's a very niche sort of superhero movie that I absolutely love and I've watched probably 20 times. It's very rewatchable, and it has some very famous names when they're much younger. So it's a lot of fun. But with those caveats, here are my top 5 favorite non-Marvel, non-DC superhero movies. Coming in at number 5, a 2010 superhero action comedy, which introduced 2 young actors to the world who would then go on to be pretty substantial stars themselves, Aaron Johnson and Chloe Grace Moretz, who I still have to watch Peripheral, but I've heard very good things. That's on my list to binge this week. It, of course, was Kick-Ass, directed by Matthew Vaughn. It was a comic book of the same name, written by 2 comic book greats, Mark Millar and John Romita Jr. But it was probably best known for the fact that you had Chloe Grace Moretz as this 10-year-old vigilante who's swearing and violent the entire time. And parents were like, is this okay? I'm not sure if this is okay. It's a very different type of superhero movie. A lot of fun, very vigilante. You've also got, Nicolas Cage that gets to show up, who of course was Ghost Rider in 2 films. Mark Strong, who was the bad guy in the first, not the bad guy in a dozen British movies, but he was Lord Blackwood in the first Sherlock Holmes movie. He was Sinestro in the horrible Green Lantern movie with Ryan Reynolds. So we had a lot of great folks in it. It's very violent. It's brutal, but it's kind of the type of movie that you feel like 16-year-old comic book fans would absolutely write or talk about or create, because it is absolute wish fulfillment. It's the kid suddenly becomes a superhero, and how would you do it? It takes the whole Spider-Man high school kid becoming a superhero, story, and kind of turns it on its ear in a very, very violent way. It was very successful. In 2011, it won the Empire Award for the Best British Film, which is easy for me to say. It did spawn a sequel, which was not good, so we won't talk about that.
It had a sequel?
It did. It had a sequel, Kick-Ass 2, which had Jim Carrey in it as well. Which, yeah, it was just weird. It didn't come off as well. It felt like almost a caricature of itself, because Kick-Ass was so kind of unique in what it was, and then it came back again, and now it was kind of falling into the same tropes, but trying to play against them as well. So not as good, but definitely worth watching. It is available on... If you want to rent it, you can rent it on just about any service, whether that's Apple TV, Amazon, Google Play, Vudu, Redbox, which still exists somehow, DirecTV, or if you subscribe to HBO Max, you can watch it without spending another dime. So Kick-Ass comes in at number 5 on the top 5 non-Marvel, non-DC Adams favorite superhero films. Coming in at number 4, and honestly, I debated with myself, and it's weird to say that I was surprised where things landed, because the entire conversation was just me, myself, and I. But I am surprised that this one didn't end up higher. When I first put the list together, I thought it was going to be probably number 2 or number 3. But then as I did the list, I realized how many good ones were out there, and it slotted into number 4. And it may not be one that immediately people think of when you think of a superhero film, but it is 1994's American superhero comedy, which brought the world Jim Carrey in his first major role, and also Cameron Diaz. Cameron Diaz is one of her first roles as well, and that was The Mask, which is technically a superhero story, even though if it feels... It is. He becomes a superhero, then he becomes the villain, and then he has to, become the good guy then at the end. It is a very much the classic, Icarus flies too high, his wings melt, and then he's got to, make up for it before he crashes to the ground. It was very, very over the top. In case you haven't seen it, and granted, it has been 30, almost to 94 to 22, Carrie.
Oh my gosh.
28 years. 28 years since The Mask came out. But Jim Carrey stars as Stanley Ipkiss, a hapless everyday bank clerk who finds a magical wooden mask that transforms him into the Mask, a green-faced troublemaker with the ability to cartoonishly alter himself and his surroundings at will. It very much has this sort of nutty professor, like 2 personalities sort of thing. Maybe this was the natural progression of Urkel and Stefan from Family Matters, just in a different way. It was a huge hit. Jim Carrey was actually nominated for a Golden Globe for his performance, which kind of blew me away. I totally forgot that. And it won an Academy Award it was nominated for a Academy Award for Best Visual Effects, but lost to Forrest Gump.
Oh.
Because of all the old footage that they had, and added Forrest Gump into, which at the time seemed pretty amazing. It also, much like our first movie, Kick-Ass, had a horrible sequel that we don't talk about, that didn't actually star hardly anyone from the first movie.
It was
Son of the Mask. Son of the Mask, yes, and it was incredibly bad. And it was like Jamie Kennedy was always sort of like the dollar store version of Jim Carrey. So it kind of made sense that he was in the film, but it took 11 years for them to even make a movie that bad after The Mask. So it's been a long time since The Mask came out, but a lot of fun. Definitely some of the jokes are a little more off color now than we thought they were then. There's some definite chauvinistic tendencies with The Mask, that is put up. But of course, you've got a really cute dog involved as well, which is always fun. You can watch The Mask. You can only rent it. So I did that again. You can only rent it Amazon, Apple TV, Google Play, YouTube, Redbox, all of those. Looks about $3.99. Also, if you go to any pawn shop or secondhand store in the world, you're going to be able to find a DVD of it, probably for $2 if you really want to see The Mask. But it's a lot of fun. I'm kind of surprised it's not more available on streaming services, but I think it falls into one of those sort of holes, that isn't like a classic Disney movie, and so it kind of falls into the abyss. So number 4 is The Mask. Number 3, I actually debated about as well because I thought it was one of the first ones that came to mind, and there were actually 2 options for this character. This character is a Dark Horse Comics character, which is almost super mainstream, but not. But we're going to allow it because we were only talking for non-Marvel and DC. And that, of course, is Hellboy. Hellboy has had 3 films, but my favorite of the 3, even though I very much enjoyed the 2019 version with David Harbour, who you just mentioned in Violent Night, the 2004 version was very early on Guillermo del Toro. And his special effects and storycraft is, in my opinion, really well done. I love the cast. You've got Ron Perlman as Hellboy, Selma Blair, Jeffrey Tambor, John Hurt is a supporting role. You've also got Doug Jones, who has been one of the greatest costumed actors of the last 30 years.
He's been about him quite a few times. Yeah,
that's the. One of those, I think it's a false memory where I remember us interviewing him, but I don't think we did.
We did. I tell you this every time.
Okay, we did interview him. See, like
I tell you every time.
I know, but then I don't believe myself. But yes, I remember the interview and it was real. Yay, there's a Santa Claus at it. But a lot of fun, 2004. It tells the story of the birth of Hellboy, gives some of the lore. The comics are so good and there's so much to them. One of my right across from me on my bookshelf right now is a trade paperback of Hellboy's Seed of Destruction run, and it is so good. Mike Mignola created an entire beautiful, interesting, and conflicted world to drop this character that really questions, are we nature versus nurture? And it's such a good series, and I love the first movie. I wish it had gotten bigger, but I also feel like maybe it's just a little too on the nose to be a major hit. I mean, it's going to be hard for some people to go to a movie called Hellboy, and to let it be anything other than what they assume from the title. So just sad that it didn't become a bigger hit. But of the 3 Hellboy movies, the favorite for me is 2004's original Guillermo del Toro one, simply for creating a universe. And I think that the fun of the film versus the gore, they tried to go a little bit gorier, scarier with the second one. And I think there was just, the first one was more fun. And it's a great entrance into the world of Hellboy. And I highly recommend, if you get a chance, to check out some of the trade paperbacks and the original comics by Mike Mignola. But if you'd like to watch the original 2004 Guillermo del Toro Hellboy, you can stream it on HBO Max, something called Hoopla, which is a thing, and also DirecTV. Of course, you can rent it at all of your favorite. I've also got a DVD, so if you're nearby, just let me know, and I'll I can lend it to you for 5 days. But after that, I start charging it.
You start.
So number 3 is the original 2000. I'll start a fee. Yeah, there's a fee. You gotta buy me a drink or something afterwards. Although I have had bad luck renting out books or lending out books. I had one friend keep a book from like 8th grade through college, or I think he returned it to me at my wedding like 9 years later.
Oh my gosh.
So there's certain people that like it was like we talked about it every once in a while over the 9 years. I'm like, oh, do you still have Timothy Todd's The Last Command? He's like, oh yeah, I'll bring it, don't worry. And it took a long time.
Well, as long as you had it, you knew where it was.
Yeah, at least I knew where it was. I wasn't all that worried. So I do lend things out, but I never forget. So coming in at number 3 is Hellboy, the original from 2004. Now, the top 2 in this list are 2 of my favorite movies ever, and they are so different in tone. It is a bit striking. I originally thought when I was writing this that the movie I'm about to talk about would be number 1. I have an absolute love for it. I also kind of love that it has never been remade and is almost forgotten about, even when it is a Disney movie. And Disney seems to come back again around everything, but this one has not been touched. And it is from 1991, and it is the beautiful little film starring Bill Campbell, Jennifer Connelly, and Alan Arkin, Timothy Dalton, who's always better as a bad guy than he is as a hero, Paul Sorvino, and it is The Rocketeer. The Rocketeer tells this. Right, but as soon as I say it, people are like, "Oh yeah," but it never pops up. It's just kind of out there and forgotten. It tells the story of stunt pilot Cliff Secord, who discovers a hidden rocket pack that he then uses to turn into a hero and vigilante. There are Nazis involved. You've got Howard Hughes, who's played by John Locke from Lost, which is a very weird visual now. Was normal back then before he was on Lost, but now that I see him as Howard Hughes, it just really throws me for a loop. You got the FBI involved, and of course, test pilots and aerial maneuvers, and the idea that man could fly with a simple rocket on his back, which we've been trying to do since we figured out how to make, people fly in planes. We've been trying to do Rocket Man ever since, and it does not look nearly as cool as it does in The Rocketeer. Again, anything with Jennifer Connelly is going to be amazing because she's one of the most naturally beautiful individuals on Earth. But she also gets, a little bit of a character this time instead of just being stage dressing. But it is the story of a down on his luck, racer, wannabe star, line cook guy that becomes a hero. It's a lot of fun. There's a Zeppelin in it at the end. There are, car chases and air battles, and it sets up even at the end that you could have a sequel, but I kind of love that it has never ever fallen into the trap of being remade or turned into a cartoon. It is just a fun, quick film, 108 minutes, not even 2 hours. It barely made its budget back. It was the budget was $40 million. It made $46 million at the box office. So Disney probably was like, this is a dog. It's not going to make us money. We're not going to spend a lot of time. But you go to Disneyland or Disney World, you will not see the Rocketeer. I cannot remember seeing the Rocketeer anywhere, even in like the background of a montage. So he has kind of been forgotten, but it's a lot of fun. It, of course, is available to stream on Disney Plus. If you want to rent it, you can find it on, all the regular spots. But if you've forgotten about The Rocketeer, if you've never watched it, it is absolutely worth a family movie night, 108 minutes. It holds up. It's fun. It's a period piece from the 1930s. So, nothing really feels out of place. The special effects aren't quite as good as they would be today, but they're also more practical. And I think that works in a fun way as well. So coming in at number 2 of the best superhero, non-Marvel, non-DC movies is The Rocketeer. And at number 1, I almost feel bad that I didn't immediately put this one at number 1 because it was almost I didn't immediately think of it as a superhero movie. Mm-hmm. But like many movies that ended up having a lot of bad sequels, the bad sequels seem to have watered down how good the original was. And there are so many missed opportunities in life and in Hollywood, especially, where you think somebody's going to be a star and something happens and it never comes off. And there have been, tons of actors over time who I thought were going to be so much bigger than they were. I mean, I was convinced that Edward Norton was going to have, 9 or 10 Oscars by now when I first saw him perform. I thought that,
well, if he wasn't such a jerk to work with, he might.
Right. Yeah. I thought that we would have way more starring vehicles for Guy Pearce. After LA Confidential and Memento, I thought this guy's going to be a leading man, and now you only see him as a bad guy, maybe, or like a side, a small character. But this movie's star never got the chance to have the breakout that they should have had because of the tragic events that happened on the set. And that, of course, is another movie from 1994, The Crow, which starred Brandon Lee as Eric Draven, a murdered musician who is resurrected to avenge his death and that of his fiancee. It is based on a comic, but of course, The Crow was haunted by the tragedy of Lee being fatally wounded during the filming and dying. After that, Paramount Pictures decided not to distribute the film. Basically said, we don't think it's right to put this out. Miramax picked it up, finished it. They finished it with script rewrites and body doubles and digital effects, because it was about 75 to 80% done when the tragic accident happened. It is horrible that Brandon Lee, who I think this movie would have made him a gigantic star.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And he could have been, we were in that mid-90s era where Bruce Willis and Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone have been the action heroes for the last 10 to 15 years. And they're, Harrison Ford too, they're all kind of aging, and there was like, who's going to step up and be the next action hero leading man? And it turned out to be Tom Cruise for a while. Then we had Will Smith, but Brandon Lee would have been in that conversation if not for the tragic events of the film. But that story is also overshadowed what a powerfully good movie it is. It has its moments where it feels over the top, and yes, the idea of a crow bringing your soul back so you could avenge your death and your girlfriend, it's a little bit over the top, but it is such a compelling movie, and Brandon Lee is so good in it that the powerful part of the movie is they've made three sequels, and they tried a television series. Like, you keep trying to catch the lightning in a bottle, and you couldn't, because Brandon Lee was so good as Eric Draven that no one will be able to ever capture that again. It is your classic revenge tale. There are some very violent scenes. I mean, I have a group of friends where we will still say to each other, fire it up, with which is the bad guys chant at one point, and we immediately know what we're talking about. We went and saw, that group of friends went and saw The Crow 2, and we also know that was one of the worst movies we've ever seen, which makes it so much harder after how good The Crow was. But when I rewatched it this week, and the thing that hit me, and again, this is one of those things where you watch a movie when you first see it, you're at one age, and for me, as a 13-year-old kid, it was this fantasy fulfillment, oh yes, I was wrong, and Batman, I'm going to avenge, that was the focus. And after watching it again this week, something that I think 13-year-old me missed, which, shocking that 13-year-old me wasn't as cognizant as probably he should have been. How 41-year-old me is as cognizant of the bigger picture as I should be. But the thing that caught me is at the very end, spoiler alert, the movie's been out for 28 years, so forgive me if I spoil it. You should definitely go watch it. And if you don't want to know what happens in the very final scene, which is more of a denouement and talks about the soul of the film as opposed to what happens in the film, but they're talking about what has truly motivated, and what do we do now? Like, was this all about vengeance? And it feels like, so vengeance was the powerful motivator of this entire film. And what happens as all sort of the closing credits and the last scene happen, and the close credits are about to roll, and there's a voiceover that talks about how that the most powerful part of the film isn't the vengeance, it's that while the people we love may die, the love that you have for them lasts forever.
Ooh, deep.
And yeah, it hits you a little different when you're a little bit older, and I think I totally missed that when I was a 13-year-old kid. But definitely is something that I think it's amazing that I don't know if that was in the original script, or if the way they phrased that was almost a homage to what happened on the filming of the movie and losing Brandon Lee.
Yeah.
But it definitely gives it a lot more weight and depth, and it's not just a revenge movie. It leaves you thinking a little bit more, and kind of hits you in a different spot. So that's why The Crow for me is number one on the list. The original should not be its shine should not be dimmed by all of the horrible sequels and the people that tried to catch lightning in a bottle and totally missed the feeling and the tone of the film. They all turned into almost slasher horror type, movies, and it missed out completely on what the original was. If you've never seen The Crow and you would like to watch it, it is available to stream right now for subscription on Paramount Plus, and all of their versions. So that's Paramount Plus, which you can get with Amazon Prime, Paramount Plus, which you can get through the Roku channel, and then Showtime, which you can get Paramount Plus as well. And of course, you can rent it at all of your various places for the requisite $2.99 to $3.99. But my favorite movie of these 5 superhero movies that are not from Marvel and DC, number 1 is The Crow, and that is the A side.
Now, okay, let me ask you a really quick question. Would you consider John Wick a superhero movie?
I wouldn't. I feel like it's an action movie, but in the same way that I don't think Die Hard's a superhero movie.
Okay, because I'm just saying, compared to like The Crow, although there isn't like a super, I guess he has like some kind of, there's like,
there's a ethereal source of power. There's something supernatural. There's something more than just being like a really good shot. Yeah. And there's definitely elements of that in like if you told me that John McClane was blessed by an angel, that would explain a lot of the things that happen in the Die Hard movies. Or Indiana Jones, has been gifted special powers by aliens. But for me, I needed to look for something that was a little bit more. I got my powers and now what I'm going to do with them, sort of thing. Right. That superhero story. But yeah, I could totally see like if we expand it to action movies, you've got that entire guns and in soldiers genre as well. One movie that I debated on, but I felt like it felt too close to a talented soldier, a cop, was Zorro, because it almost felt like there was a superhero element to it, but when it comes down to it, it's just a guy who's really good with a sword. Even he doesn't have that sort of magical something else that was part of my characteristics for these top 5. But it's definitely very debatable. And one of the links that is on our website is someone else's list of not best movies. IMDb put together. Somebody on IMDb had a list. There's a lot on there that I would question whether or not they're really superhero movies, but there also are a lot of interesting ones on there that kind of have a gray area. So I welcome feedback if people feel like there are ones that I missed or movies that I discounted when I shouldn't have, or if you absolutely hate one of these movies and you want to argue with me about it, hit up the DMs because it's Christmas. Let's have a fight.
No time like the holidays to fight.
No, I mean we're all ready. We're all kind of pre-gaming for that family dinner that goes awry. So let's get some sparring in to get going.
All right, there you go. Is that the A side?
That is the A side.
Awesome. Well, you know the spiel, Adam.
I do. Thank you for listening. And if you'd like to listen more, if you've stumbled upon us by accident or we're looking for a specific other podcast and you saw this recommended, please subscribe on your favorite streaming platform. And if you want to know more about us or want to find out how to get to more of those streaming platforms, go to asidebsidepodcast.square.site. And there you'll find information about all of our episodes, all of our sources. You can check out our merch. You can buy Brooke a coffee, and because we have fallen victim to the craze that is AI art, and it's been 15 years since Brooke and I did a photo shoot together, so we have no updated pictures for the website. We have gone and done the AI arts trend, and there's a bunch of photos of us in various genres, would you say? Anime, there's some action. There's one where I don't have any idea what kind of armor I'm wearing, but it does not appear to be very protective of
you look like you're wearing like a Grecian sports bra.
Yeah, Yeah, and there's some the weird creases, but it's a lot of fun. I know that some people have had, there's been some controversy with the whether this art is stolen. This is one of those moments where I think as technology continues to evolve, we're going to have more and more gray areas and questions that need to be answered. So I think in a way this puts it definitely into the public consciousness, and maybe we'll start to have more conversations about what is art and how is art stolen, and can, you know, is this real art because it was computer generated, and that sort of thing. It's a lot of interesting questions, but in the meantime there's some really fun pictures, and check them out. Everyone's been doing the stuff on Instagram and whatnot, and we had to get in on it too, so that's also available on our website.
Absolutely. All right, well, this has been episode 119. Thanks, Adam.
Thank you, Brooke. I thought I was going to be like more